Welcome in. We are here to surprisingly talk about mid-majors ahead of all the conference tournaments coming up. We are trying to get you guys ready for March Madness. And I just got so lucky to be able to grab Matt Waldman from CBB Review. He's a huge help. He does all of our writing for it, and I'm excited for him. Matt, let the people know about you.
Hey, yeah. So my name is Matt Waldman. I have been writing about basketball for probably 3 or 4 years now. On top of doing the mid-major coverage, I try to do bracketology as well. I'm all in on the bracket matrix and all that fun stuff that comes around every year. I'm a Wofford graduate, which probably plays a role in covering the small schools. We are one of the smallest schools in Division I, and so what better way to fight for the schools that don't get enough recognition than to write about it? And so that's my goal. Shout out the teams that don't get the recognition until they're basically a 15 or 16 in March, because that success should be celebrated year-round, just like your projected 1 and 2 seeds.
Yeah, and, I'm excited for it. That we're going to start off basically with Colonial. It's one of the smaller conference, but Charleston early in the season had a nice start, was ranked, and then just kind of had those unfortunate in-season losses and just started to tumble completely out of the top 25 because, mid-major, that's how it works, unfortunately. You lose one and you start knocking down, but they're top seeds are Hofstra, Charleston, Townsend, and, of course, UNC Wilmington. Pretty impressive. So I'm just kind of curious, who do you like to win it? I think it's kind of obvious, but we'll see where you go with it.
Yeah, so it's such a strange finish here in the sense that Charleston's that everyone's like, are they going to get in that large? Do they need in that large? Can they run through here? But Hofstra is the 1 seed because they beat them. They both finished at 16-2 in the league. And when you tie and only play once with the unbalanced schedule in this league, that's the card that you get dealt. And so neutral site, all things considered in this tournament, I don't think it's going to affect anything in that nature. But we forget that Towson was the favorite coming into the season, and everyone liked the talent that they had, especially behind a guy like Nick Timberlake, who's been getting looked at by some NBA scouts this year. And so on top of that, UNC Wilmington themselves went out and I think won a postseason tournament last year. They've got a solid group. And so you look at the top 4 and you can say realistically, all 4 of them can make a run. And so when I look at a favorite, I kind of go back to the preseason favorite. There's a reason they're picked all along. And so my gut leans towards Towson in this tournament. And that in large part has to do with the fact that though they lost to Charleston twice, they have pushed them to the brink both times. The first time they played, there was almost a brawl somewhere in there. Nobody ever caught the camera between the timeouts, late game, one of those type of atmospheres where you create this 2 teams who are really good fighting for that position. And it's just something I think Towson, if they get that opportunity to hit Charleston in the semifinals, I don't think they let it slip away as much as Charleston has on the line with the at-large tournament there. And then I just kind of like the way that they also can match up with Hofstra if Hofstra can get there too. So Towson's my favorite in large part because they were the favorite early on. You have some good surprises ahead of them seeding-wise. But I look back not that long ago to last year's tournament. Same situation. Delaware was the favorite at the beginning of the season, dropped all the way to the 5 seed come tournament time, but the team that was projected to be what it was showed up when the tournament came around.
Yeah, and it makes complete sense, but I can't help myself. I have to go with Charleston. I think that they're just so bitter, and they need to get at least 2 to get that at large. I think that's really what they ideally would win the tournament and just seal it, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I have to believe that Charleston's going to be the one that you're kind of have to think will win it, but God, it's going to be tough. I could easily see Towson doing it, and so you kind of brought up one of my players to watch, and Nick Timberlake, man, he's been just destroying teams. He's had, I think, 3 or 4 30-point games. He's a senior. He's clearly stepped into his own this season and has been a big boost for the team. And another great one is, of course, Jameer Nelson, who isn't going, you probably won't see a whole lot of just because of the fact that it is that time of year when you're a lower seed. It's less likely that you have that. You have to stack so many games to get ahead at this point, and having those 3 or 4 games back to back, it's definitely going to wear on you. But definitely a player that I think has a lot of talent. Again, talk about a lot of 30-point games, and right now he's been stepping up his past 3 games. He's 39, 30, and 22 points is pretty impressive for him, and he just continues to grow. And I'm excited for them. Do you have any players that you are kind of curious to watch in the CAA?
Yeah, my top one, and those two that you mentioned are certainly ones I'm keeping my eye on. I have the pleasure of being someone that lives in Delaware. I know quite a bit about Jameer Nelson and the things that he's been able to put up. So, but when I start, aside from the ones that you mentioned, I look at Aaron Estrada over at Hofstra. I easily one of the best players in this league, and a guy that I don't want to say forgotten about, because he did the same thing at Hofstra last year, putting up solid numbers. But if you know anything about him, he started at St. Peter's, so in that same metro New York area, and had a great freshman year. Decided to try and test the transfer waters like everybody else. Went out to Oregon and really just became a role player. Didn't get what he expected. Returned back closer to where he's familiar with at Hofstra and has been killing it for 2 years. So certainly a guy that can put that team on his back and has that 4 years of experience. Even though he didn't play as much at Oregon, he's got that experience. He's been there. He knows what it takes to get it done. And then when you switch to one more guy, this is kind of maybe a homer pick a little bit, but Ryan Larson over at Charleston. He is a graduate transfer from yours truly, Wofford College. And that's because Wofford doesn't have a graduate program. So you can't play your 5th year at Wofford, regardless of if you want to. So while he is a Midwest guy, he stayed south, went over to Charleston to play for Pat Kelsey this year. And while the numbers aren't going to stand out, and that's kind of the way it was when he was at Wofford too, he is one of those glue guys. You know, he's a guy who's going to run your offense. He's going to play physical defense, not afraid to take a charge, even if you think he flops every now and then. But he's just that guy that you want, that's going to be physical, tough, and will your team to a win, whatever he's got to do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the big things you like to watch for the mid-majors. Is just the fact that these guys are definitely scrappier. They have that underdog mentality, and they're willing to come in and do all the gritty stuff that really helps them put that win in. But this is a tournament, like you said. It's going to be it's March 3rd through the 7th. So you have 5 games in just as many days, and that's just a lot to have to deal with. Luckily, it's starting off with the 11-12 to play in, and it's Hampton and Monmouth, and it's just talk about a rough start. But they get Drexel, and I don't think there's really any big surprises that you'll see move through here. But I am kind of curious who. I think I know, because you've already kind of stated it, but who your dark horse is to win the CAA?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say Towson if you want to go that route. But since they were my favorite, I'm going to drop 1 seed down and go UNC Wilmington. Now, the confidence that I have in that is a little bit lower, just because the Seahawks have kind of been up and down. They started out really well, and everyone thought that was the team that was going to push Charleston, because, you know, they lost to them by 2 the first time they played. But then they started losing to they lost to William & Mary. They compounded it to a team that's not that great. And when you look at their overall record against the top 3 seeds above them, didn't beat a single one of them this year. So when you kind of look at that, you say, is Wilmington really the team that can make a run? But at the same time, the talent's there. They've shown that they can play well at times. And, you know, one of the big things with a team like that is that they do a great job of taking care of the ball for the most part, and they play good defense. And those 2 things can travel no matter what. So dark horse, am I confident in it? Am I thinking that if Drexel advances as the 5 seed, could they beat them? Absolutely. But it's also a team that if they find the rhythm and refocus at the right time, they can absolutely make a run.
Yeah, UNC Wilmington is definitely one that you've always has a weird kind of stretch where they don't know what they're doing, and then they get back on course, and it's very difficult to beat them. So I could definitely see that being the case. But yeah, Towson's definitely the one who's just has that scary ability. I mean, I guess if you want to look even lower at the 7th seed, I like NCA&T. That's going to be another potential one that you could easily see. But that's another team that had a couple of moments this year that really just shocked people. And so, but anyway, we'll get out of that one. We'll move into I guess better conference. I don't know. And move into the Southern, and you have March 3rd through the 6th. It's coming up. It's going to be quick again, starting Friday. Top seeds are Furman, Sanford, UNC Greensboro, and Western Carolina. So got to know, who do you think is going to take it for the Southern Conference?
Well, again, for any, this is my bread and butter conference, getting that Wofford is out of here. I follow this one probably more religiously than any other league, even some of the bigger leagues every year. And so, without a question, without a doubt, this will probably come to no surprise to Furman fans, but I'm not going to pick the Paladins. And it's not that I don't think they're a good team. I do. I've tried to be one of those Wofford fans over the last few years that recognizes Furman's good. We have to live in a world where Furman's good, and we understand that. But when you look at a team that can kind of maybe stymie that a little bit, and I believe one of the two teams that did defeat Furman three teams, because they had 3 losses, it was UNC Greensboro. And so it was an overtime loss way back in January. And ironically enough, they played twice. Everybody plays twice in the SoCon. They split. The game that UNCG lost was a defensive battle, and that's what UNCG does well. So really, Greensboro's defense is going to carry every game. It's going to be there. It's a matter of can they find enough to put the ball in the basket in a game. And so I'm going with the Spartans, and I think the bracket just lines up a little bit better for them. And so I think they can get to the tournament a little easier. The downside of being Wofford is that if UNC Greensboro makes my prediction come true, they have to beat Wofford in the first round. And so, but I think that's the team. And quite frankly, for as good as Furman's been over the last 5 to 6 years, they haven't been able to finish. And I know that's been a big motivator for that program for the last couple of years. Last year, buzzer beater, there's really not much you can do about that, right? The heartbreak is all over. So it's more of can Furman win it, and should they? Probably. But they have to prove it to me, and they haven't done that over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, you've already stated it. Furman is just they have the weapons. They have 2 of the top 5 scorers on their team. That's they're offensively there. But if it does come down to it being a defensive battle, they really do struggle. And so, if that's the case, I could see why UNCG would be your guys, and easily just move on from there. But yeah, so you kind of brought them up, but kind of curious, who are the players to watch in this tournament?
Yeah, so the first one is the biggest one, just named Player of the Year, I believe, by both the media and the coaches, because the SoCon likes to split their awards. Jalen Slauson, just a guy that I've been so impressed with the entire time he's been at Furman, and watching him play, the effort that he brings on every possession and the defense that he brings. And then the offensive game is kind of developed with the defense. And so he's become such a complete player that when you watch that, it's a treat to see that. And then not only, I don't think I had this guy down originally, but not only do you have him, and you have Mike Bothwell at the point guard position, who makes everything run for that team. And so what a treat to be, Bob Ritchie down there. And those are the guys you're working with. And that's just the start. They've got depth too. So that's why Furman is what they are this year in the past couple of seasons. That's what they've built. So this 1-2 punch of Slauson and Bothwell, you've got to be able to watch that and just take it in. As far as a few other guys, I put Jake Stevens on here. I don't know if he's going to be healthy, but given what he did, his track record at VMI prior, and then transferring over with Dan Earl to Chattanooga when he took the job there, and look no further than how well Chattanooga did before and after he got hurt, ironically enough, against Furman about halfway through the league season. And it was just such a different story. Now, you could argue, were the Mocs all Stevens at that point? Maybe, maybe not, right? And they've had to rediscover themselves a little bit, mostly behind the arc and a 3-point shooting team now. But he makes them better, regardless of whether you think he's their only good player or not. And so if he's healthy, Chattanooga becomes an entirely different and more scary team in the bracket for anybody. And then finally, somebody who's probably a little under the radar is Jordan King at East Tennessee State. Another guy who he's going to put his team on the back most nights. And when he's on, he's hard to stop. And so, again, do I think ETSU is going to make a run? Most likely not. But do they have a guy who can help them do that potentially? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably because I'm just crazy, but the guy I'm actually really excited for is Stephen Clark. He has just really grown as a player at the Citadel and is just really come on and grown into his own. He's averaging 16.6 points a game. He has 3 double-doubles this year. It was almost 4, but he couldn't quite get a shot to fall for him. And, man, it's players like that can do so much. He is actually the second highest average scorer for the Southern, as well as the block leader. Not surprising there at his 6'8" frame. He's just one of those talented players, and I'm really excited for him. I hope this is a team that can shock people. I mean, it definitely can come out and play, but you're not going to see a whole lot of it. So if you get the chance to watch Citadel play, you kind of have to, and enjoy every second of it, because he's quite the impressive player for, at least in my mind. I like those tall, lanky guys that can kind of do some guard play and have that talent. But kind of curious, now that you've kind of touched on it, you talked about Jake Stevens and all these other great players, but I'm curious who you think your dark horse potentially could come out of this bracket that just shocks everybody and just is a surprise.
Yeah, so I kind of hinted at this, but it's Chattanooga, and as a 7 seed, you kind of think, well, can they really make it that far? They have to play the extra day. That was such a big game between Chattanooga and Wofford last week in the regular season finale, because it was basically the battle for who's going to play on Friday night and who's not, right? And so, does it certainly depend on Stevens' health? It can, but even at the same time, like I said, Chattanooga had to rediscover themselves once he got hurt, and coming in on a 3-game losing streak doesn't feel like the most confident thing that you can have, but they've shown at times that they can hang around, and if Stevens is there, they can make a run. Samford is a team that they have pushed. Their combined losses to them are by 6 points this year. So, and that second loss was just a couple weeks ago. So they've got familiarity there if they match up with Samford. And then again, can they hang with whether it's UNCG or Wofford, whoever gets by that there? I think they can, right? And so it's a team that maybe hinges on the health of Stevens, but regardless, Dan Earl has been around the block. He's been in the SoCon a while. He knows these teams in and out, regardless of whether he was at VMI or now at Chat. So they're the ones I'm watching.
Yeah, and I'm going to go a little safer and say it's Western Carolina. I mean, they have 3 players that are just so good together in Jackson, Claude, and Woolbright, and they work so well. I mean, they just kind of feed each other, and it's definitely potential if they happen to go off one night. It could be an issue for anybody. So I definitely think that your pick's a little too risky for my blood, but I completely understand why you went with it. But in any case, I it's going. That's why you like these little conferences, though, is because anybody can show up at any time, and it just makes it so fun. But it's you have 4 days and got to get it done.
And to build off that point, I know we're not talking about the Atlantic Sun. They're almost through their tournament at this point in time, but like you said, you have a few days ago where Queens College, first year Division I, they played well this year, and they're taking 1 seed Kennesaw State to the brink. Ended up losing by 1, but that's the way it is. That's a team that's they can't even make the NCAA tournament, and they know that coming in, but yet there they are pushing the 1 seed to the brink, and actually did beat Kennesaw a few weeks prior. So, you see how much it matters, regardless of whether there's a bid on the line or not.
Well, and geez, watching Darius McGee just destroy his first game, I was like, wow, that's quite the impressive player for sure. Just he's like, oh, don't worry, I got you guys. We'll just take this and not even have to sweat it. We'll be completely fine. But and I mean, talk about great players. We're again, Detroit Mercy. You got Antoine looking for the points leader, and it could easily happen. They have Youngstown favored by 9 points tonight, and that'll be another fun one that I think hopefully a lot of people will be watching, just because it's going to be in the record books. And granted, there's a lot of ifs to go along with that. It's his 5th year, he has more games, the 3-point line's there, but it's still an impressive feat in any case that he's going to end up potentially being the leading scorer for the NCAA.
And I admire his commitment. I mean, I know his dad coaches there with him, so that's probably played a big role, but to spend 5 years at a mid-major school is just doesn't happen anymore, right? Guys might spend 2 or 3 years and then say, I'm going to go finish out at a bigger school, even if it carves out a smaller role. And so that commitment, and I think his post the other day on Twitter when he finished out against Purdue Fort Wayne, that he's just so thankful for the support. And it's a two-way street, right? The fans recognize, and students and everybody that's committed to that program and supported over the years sees the type of work that he's put in to be the best he can at Detroit Mercy. And so now it's paying dividends 100-fold.
Yeah. And like you said, having that COVID year really helps him, but man, he's just again, you said it. This is a time when NIL deals are now in play. The transfer portal has become massive for a lot of teams, and it's completely changed. I mean, I know all about the transfer portal, being a Wichita State fan, and so dealing with all that has been just a mess. And seeing, I mean, CBS put out a great article on all the former Shocker players that are just thriving in their new situations, and it's just incredible to see that all these players that, I mean, have that opportunity to potentially get seen by scouts, get seen at a bigger conference, have more playing time, and really excel and just take it by the horns are doing so. And so having Antoine as one of those players is a big part of it. But all right, we have to move into the last one in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. It's another, just, another tiny school. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about this conference. It's so tiny. It starts next week, so they have plenty of time for you guys to look at. The top seats are Howard, Norfolk State, North Carolina Central, and Maryland Eastern Shore. And I think, it's hard not to say, but Howard is the one. Somehow they ended up getting it, and so it's wow. Actually, on here it says Norfolk. Good for them. They I was worried they had them ranked ahead, and so I was like, wow, maybe Howard got the.
Well, they've got their regular season finales tonight, so there could be some movement. But those top four are set, I believe, as the top four. Just matters where they're going to end up.
Yeah, somehow I had Howard ahead, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. But if they keep Norfolk there, that's going to be another good one. But here's our lineups, and who do you think is going to win it?
Yeah, so kind of when in doubt with a league where you've kind of seen one or two teams make the runs over the last few years, it's kind of hard to go away from that. And so with the success that Robert Jones has built down at Norfolk State, it's hard not to see the Spartans finding a way. They've done it before. The only team in the last couple of years in that league that's done it before. And you've got a few guys that have been around the block there, so they know what it takes. And so when it comes to a 2 or 3 game scenario where you're win 3 and you go to the big dance, it's hard to bet against a team like Norfolk State that's been there, knows what it takes, and has a winning culture. They're one of the few teams in that league that's come out with a winning record over the last few seasons, even when they haven't made the tournament.
Yeah, that 20-9 is definitely an impressive feat for him. Seeing him and have the game tonight, so that'll be an interesting part. But I mean, yeah, I have to agree. It's Norfolk State for sure. If you have a player that is top of the league in every category, it makes your team a lot better, I think. So when you have players like Joe Bryant and Chris Bankston, and they're just dominating their stat sheet and just being a huge part of the game, it's hard not to see that those are definitely players to watch. But man, it's just impressive to see how well balanced this team is. But literally the only thing I guess they don't really do is turnover. Like they don't cause a lot of turnovers. They're not a big team that will really press you on that, but they are definitely an offensive team. And so it's quite an impressive feat for them. And they're just so consistent. And so I guess I let in straight into it, but those are the two players that I'm making sure if you have time to watch them, you definitely want to, because they're impressive working together. Do you have some players that you want to watch in this tournament?
Yeah, so definitely watching those two, and I'll let you talk about them all day because they certainly deserve it. And one place I went, even though Coppin State is not having the season I think even they envisioned, Sam Sessoms. He's a guy that you've got to keep an eye on. Again, quite a route. Started up at Binghamton over in the America East and was killing it for the Bearcats for 2 years. A guy that certainly was going to be on his way to many, many awards in that league. Decided to test that water, go to Penn State, and again, kind of finding his role first year. Second year was more of a bigger role there. And now finishing out what I assume is a 5th or graduate year at Coppin State. And so putting up huge numbers, averaging over 21 points a game. He's a guy that while, I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to take over and take Coppin State to a championship for one night, if that's all you get to see of him, guy you got to look out for. And then I don't think we can go without talking about players to watch if you don't focus on a player on the team that is currently sitting in that one spot, apparently, if they have the tiebreaker, right? So yeah. I look at Elijah Hawkins over at Howard, and a guy that's a local guy from DeMatha, so he stayed home and really, really has taken another step forward. Great as a freshman last year, and just continues to be that leadership role. A guy that, if he sticks around at Howard for all 4 years, is certainly going to make his mark in the record books in that league as well.
Yeah, he actually has a couple double-doubles, but it's not the traditional kind. He's actually doing assists. He's an assist leader for his team, and he's quite the impressive player for sure. And so I mean, it's when you're a sophomore and handling the ball that well, it's definitely an impressive feat, and it's just a great to play in front of a home crowd like that and really just show off for him. And it definitely, it's so enjoyable watching these small schools. I mean, I'm like I said, been a Wichita State fan forever, so I'm one of the tournaments I'm so excited for is the MVC every year. I love watching them play. It's always a big blast. And then of course, AAC, but now I'm really watching the Conference USA because we have a lot of teams that are coming from CUSA to the American, and it's just going to be an even more impressive time, and I'm really excited for them. But we'll go with our dark horses for the Mid-Eastern Atlantic Conference. And who do you have?
Yeah, so being where I live, we're kind of around Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania. It's all real close by. And for my own reference point, Maryland Eastern Shore, which I have to chuckle a little bit. I always knew that it was Maryland Eastern Shore, but around here locally, they're UMES, and they've always been UMES. And so to hear them referred to as Maryland Eastern Shore on a national scale because of the success they've had this year has been a little bit of a shock to me. And quite frankly, I'm used to the shorthand. So UMES comes a lot easier, but Maryland Eastern Shore, the job that Jason Crafton has done, and you kind of look at where the program was before he came in, and just one that was never really able to find a good footing. And it's a shame because historically it's a program that's very prideful, and even if they don't have the best seasons, they want that basketball team, that basketball program to do well there at the school. And to see the success this year and the work and the time, especially from a program, one of the few that took 2020 off, right? They did not play that 2020-21 season. And so not only are you looking at the impressiveness of the success this season, but the fact that you consider a lot of the players that are still playing from that time period went a whole season without playing basketball. So that's a commitment and a dedication to the players and all the hard work they put in when they weren't playing games for a full season, and the coaching staff for what they did. And now it's paying off, and it's really, really cool to see a local who gets to follow UMES a lot closer than probably anybody else in the country. And so they've got it. They've kind of faltered, right? They had a great stretch run through most of January, and now they're looking at just, 2-4 in their last 6 games. Maybe that's kind of luck running out, if you want to look at it that way. They've certainly been kind of a home court hero until recently, so playing really well at home. But either way, they're a team that's proven they can hang with the best teams, and maybe a refocus to a conference tournament is just what they need to reset and win those 3 games.
Yeah, and I completely agree. This is definitely my dark horse as well. I mean, when you have 4 players that are averaging double digits, that it's hard to just guard one person, really focus and lock them down and try and take them out of the game. But when you have that many weapons, it can definitely cause some issues for a lot of teams. And like you said, it's super impressive what he's done with the program, and it's definitely enjoyable to see that they're having that much success. And I would expect we'll see. I'm very curious to see how the portal ends up taking away players again, but that's always an issue to come up. But if you can keep some of these guys, it could definitely be even more dangerous next year, and so exciting to watch. And these are just some awesome teams. But again, their conferences, the 8th through 11th. So make sure you grab that and enjoy it, and try and watch it if you can. So we talked about some of the bigger ones. Kind of curious, do you think of in any of these conferences, is there anyone that you think could be Cinderella?
It feels like the obvious choice could be Charleston, right? Because of their position. And, if they were to snag, let's say, an 11 seed, do we really call an 11 seed Cinderella anymore? By seed, sure. But we've seen some examples over the last decade plus where an 11 seed goes on a run. It doesn't matter whether they're a power conference team or not, right? And so Charleston seems like the obvious choice just because of what they've already shown they can do this season. But if I'm going to go away from a team that's fighting for an at-large bid, I'd probably have to go back to Furman. And the pieces are there, right? And so if they can finally finish the job, get that tournament, that long-eluded tournament championship, which by the way, for as much success as Furman has had, they haven't been to the tournament since 1980. And I know because they've been successful in the last 5 to 6 years, that's become more of a talking point, especially by their fan base, right? They're waiting. When is the streak going to end? When are we going to get back? And not only that, the excitement is there because they have a team they know can win a game. And I feel like the SoCon has been so close, right? You look at what Wofford did with their successful season a few years ago, and that was definitely an anomaly. But in terms of the SoCon anyway, but when you look at the teams that the SoCon keeps sending every year, and even if the depth hasn't been as good this year as it's been in the last few seasons, the top team has been pushing and pushing and pushing. And I'm so disappointed we never got to see that East Tennessee State team in 2020 because they were more than capable of doing it. I still think Chattanooga got cheated out of a win against Illinois last year with the way they were officiating down the stretch. And so Furman is certainly a team that, with the metrics and the ratings, probably going to sit at that 14-13 line. But they're 14 or 13 I would not want to see because you have to decide how are you going to defend Slauson and Bothwell. And if you focus on one, they have the role players that can step up when they need to. And I've seen it. I've seen it myself. It's frustrating when you have JP Pagase step up and all of a sudden he's the one beating you when you think it should be the other two guys. And that's what they've got.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to touch on it just because it's hard not to, but it's Norfolk State for me as a Cinderella out of these conferences. They just have the talent there to really cause an issue, and they seem to have finally been one of the teams that have stepped up and will be one of the ones we consistently will start seeing in the NCAA tournament just because they do have that talent base and have really kind of made their name in that team. But all right, we finished all that. Now I have to know any mid-majors that you love to watch that you think could be Cinderella. Like who is going to be your favorite? Because this is the hard one for you, I'm sure, because you watch all of them. So you're doing your brackets, so have to know.
Yeah, a team that in a league that I think has been overlooked, especially this year, or in the news for the wrong reasons, if you want to look at New Mexico State's whole situation. But the WAC in KenPom, I believe, is just outside the top 10, and nobody talks about it. And you have a team that I'm keeping an eye on. They have to get the job done, right? There's no at-large bid coming out of this league. But if Sam Houston State gets through and is that team, they already have 2 wins, I believe, over Oklahoma and Utah, which you say, all right, again, it's that argument of they're kind of at the lower end of their leagues, but both teams have sat on the bubble for most of the season. Oklahoma's off of it now, and Utah, for all intents and purposes, is off of it. But they're solid teams. They've proven that they can beat the power teams. And so they've got the talent to go in, and they're not afraid. They've already seen and done what most teams can't do. And so if Sam Houston State gets through, they're playing in a tough league that doesn't get enough credit. And I laugh a little bit because I feel like New Mexico State was untested for so many years. The WAC was lower and lower. The WAC did their part, brought in some quality teams from some smaller leagues, and now they're making the league as a whole better. And because of that, you have a Sam Houston State that, if they get seeded correctly, should be around a 13, in my opinion, depending on the movement in other leagues. Could end up being a 12. That's a team, again, not going to be afraid of the moment, not going to be afraid of their opponent, and can certainly win at least one game, if not 2.
Yeah, and when you talk about Sam Houston, I mean, another Wichita State player that left the team last year in Quig Grant is doing a solid job for him. And just when you talked about the win against OU and another Wichita State player in Grant Sherfield, who those two go. That was one of the most fun games for me to watch because I was like, seeing these two players really just shine in that game was a good time. And so I love to see the success that they have. And yeah, I really enjoy those options because, like you said, the WAC is being quite the impressive team. And I mean, on that same note, I'm going to go a little scarier and go to the WCC and look at Santa Clara. That's another team that can really shock people. And I think that it's just kind of being written off because they don't play anybody. Who do they play? They lose to Gonzaga. They lose to St. Mary's. Shocker there. It's just one of those things that another team that could easily make it that is being overlooked and could definitely cause some issues for a lot of teams. But Matt, thank you so much for coming on. Please plug any articles and where people can find you.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter brick_wall77. That's a name from years ago. I just never changed it. But that's what I am on Twitter. Matt Waldman on CBB Review. I did used to write for a site called Last Word on Sports as well, where I did a whole interview series about the pandemic and how it affected teams. So I've got my last article from that pinned at the top of the Twitter profile, and you can go down that rabbit hole if you want, from a few years ago. But starting to write up some of these mid-major previews for our site CBB Review. I always last couple of years I've done a 1 seed to watch that could upset even all the way down to 16, right? We've only seen it once, but maybe Norfolk State's the one this year, right? And so, or the second one, UMBC will
could
always
happen.
have that title. So yeah, I'm Twitter, CBB Review. That's the best place to find what I do. Weekly bracketologies on Sundays, and of course, only a few more left to project. So
yeah, and again, just want to say thank you so much for coming on, and really enjoyed your insight here. And so, hey, thank you all for watching, and make sure to remember, as always, to keep up the nonsense.